Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. My name is Nick. In today's video I want to talk about if you're a breeder or if you plan on being a breeder, what tank sizes you should try to implement for your breeders and maybe even for some of your grow outs. Not that this is a grow out because this is an adult breeder, but anyway, let's get right into the video. Okay, so the first thing that I want to address is on just an overall note. Can you keep them in smaller enclosures just because you're a breeder? You probably shouldn't, right? You should still try to aim for that minimum 30 gallon that we talked about for an adult, so an 18 by 18 by 24 or something 30 gallon plus. Now, while this can be difficult, especially, you know, when you're breeding on a larger scale and you have a lot to do and, you know, things like that, it's less efficient to give them as much space as possible because then you got to buy more space, right? Space costs money. So, but it is important to remember that even though they are just, you know, even if they are breeders, they are still, you know, your animals and your pets and things like that. So it's still best to do right by them and giving them as large of a home as you can, and in my opinion. Here, I'm in the process of upgrading everything from 66 quart tubs to 112 quart tubs on this little racking system here. And we're gonna end up getting some more of those today. Some more racks today. We're gonna end up getting more racks too. I'm gonna fill this room with racks so that I can have everything in essentially a 30 gallon tub. Now, there is an argument to be made that every gecko is different and that every gecko may not be comfortable in a 30 gallon tank. There are some geckos that you'll find that they prefer a 12 by 12 by 18, you know, like a smaller 10 gallon. They do better in that. But for the most part, you're really gonna see that the majority of geckos enjoy more space. And it's really not, if you have 50 geckos, if you have 50 adult geckos and you're breeding 50 geckos, then more than likely, not all 50 of those like it small. If they do, then that just doesn't make sense, right? We have, the geckos that we have in 116 quart tubs, they do just fine. The geckos that we have in 66 quart tubs, which we're in the process of upgrading to, they do just fine as well. It's just personally, I want to take it upon myself to give my breeders much more room to still be active and things like that, you know, because we're not trying to just be a crested gecko mill, you know, a little puppy mill or anything like that. You know, they're still my pets, they're still my animals and things like that. So upgrading to these bigger tubs was important for me. I still think that if you do plan on getting into breeding, something I wish I would have known beforehand was just to make sure that you have the proper infrastructure. And some of you who are breeding on a much smaller scale, you know, Exoterra tanks and things like that may be good and just fine, and you can operate on that, and that's even, honestly, that's probably even better. But, you know, for me, I have so many and I'm breeding so many that tubs make more sense, and it's much more efficient for me to do tubs just from space and cost, which is why if I'm saving money, I want to make sure that I'm still giving them the proper amount of space. That's important to me. So while I am being efficient, I am still being mindful of what the animal needs and what the animal wants. So the big thing too that comes with enclosure sizes and what you should do or what you shouldn't do is the weight of your crested gecko. If you put your gecko in a large enclosure and the next thing you know, 2 weeks later, you come over, you weigh that gecko and it's lost 5 grams. Maybe it's probably time to downgrade it, right? You know, 2 weeks to a month, whatever. If you weigh once a month, watch your gecko's energy. You know, if your gecko gets in a big area and it's not moving around great or anything like that, then maybe it's time to downsize because they could be too scared. I've talked about this in other videos. Crested geckos are never too scared, or sorry, crested geckos will never be, quote, getting lost finding food, or they can't find their food. These guys know where food is. They can smell it. I mean, if they can find it in the wild, trust me, they can find it in a 20-inch tank. You know, like that argument never made sense to me because they can find it. The issue is do they feel comfortable enough to go out of their hiding spots to go get the food. So if you're finding that, maybe your tank needs more foliage. That's always something to consider. For if it's losing weight, you know, you need to take into account the tank and everything like that. Now, One thing too, if you do plan on breeding, you do plan on moving to tubs, you're gonna need to keep the room at a higher temp, just because you want, you can't provide heating to each and every single one of these. You can't put a CHE on it. I don't recommend putting heat tape on it. I don't think that that's a good idea at all. Yeah, I don't think that that's a good idea at all. And honestly too, where these guys come from, it's better just to have the ambient temperature be higher. Not necessarily like belly heat or things like that. You know, that they operate off of ambient temps being higher during the day, falling at night, and then kind of going on that cycle. So if you do plan on breeding like that, I would definitely recommend getting your own gecko room, or keeping your room or whatever room it is. Try to keep that room warmer than the other rooms. Typically that's easily accomplished by a space heater. I have a, what do I have? I have a infrared Dr. heater that I keep in here, and it keeps the room at 72 to 75 depending. And I have these blackout curtains on the windows so that the sun can't heat up the room more than I want it to. So once I shut the door, the room kind of, it's its own little, you know, I don't know, it's its own room, you know, the heating and everything operates on its own. And like I was saying, guys, I don't, I don't think that certain geckos being in smaller enclosures is wrong. And for the, you know, for the most part, I don't, you know, there's an argument to be made that, you know, geckos being in smaller enclosures, if they need it, I'm okay with that, you know. And if it's like, oh, they, you know, they don't eat and when they're in a bigger enclosure, and I've had the foliage right, the temperature right, and everything like that, because that can happen, you know. You're in a hobby where there's tons upon tons upon tons of geckos, right? And they're all a little different. I mean, you can lump some of them in the same as this and that, but they all have different little personalities, and they like different little things. And sometimes too, you got to be very careful about not putting your own human nature emotions into what an animal might be feeling, because we tend to overanalyze things, and we tend to be very like worst case scenario and things like that. Whereas if they're doing something, it may not be worst case, right, in their head, because they don't have the same thought processes that we do, obviously. So try to be as, you know, as distant, not distant, but try to be, I can't think of the word, but try to just, you know, try to take your emotions out of it and be as unbiased as possible when deciding if your gecko needs a smaller enclosure and things like that. Use actual like measurable data, like, oh, my gecko, when it was in a 12 by 12 by 18, it ate 5 out of 7 times. And now that it's in a 112 quart tub, it's only eaten 3 out of 10 times. You know, like measurements like that, where it's like, okay, clearly something changed and the gecko doesn't like it. I would also say, though, you need to, anytime you change something for your crested geckos, anticipate them having to acclimate, and that taking time. Don't expect anything to be rushed. So when you're breeding and you're getting your tanks together and things like that, and you upgrade, don't think that they're going to eat night one. Once again, some of them will, most of them won't. It just is the way it is. If you plan on breeding, you know, make sure that you're prepared for it. First of all, make sure you've done your research, and make sure that you're pairing desirable crested geckos to one another. Be careful just breeding for fun, not to discourage anybody or anything like that, but, you know, one female, she can lay up to 18 to 20 eggs a year potentially. So that's a lot of babies for fun, you know. That's just a lot of work involved in that, trust me. You know, I go through it. So it can be a lot, but, you know, if that's what you want to do, I say go for it. You know, follow your dreams, follow whatever you want to do. That's the video, guys. If you did like it, give it a thumbs up. Comment down below what enclosure sizes you keep your geckos in. And until next time, guys, stay safe and stay positive.